Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 59 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. We give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we hope you prevail throughout Week 12 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, it's Waiver Wire Tuesday / Waiver Wire Wednesday coming up. We have a lot of injuries we've got to talk about. It's a loaded injury segment. How you feeling on this Tuesday?
I feel a lot better than I did yesterday. I feel a lot better.
Okay, moving on.
After Monday Night Football, looks like I'm going to escape with a 4-1 fantasy week. Feel a little bit better about my Jets. We'll get into later about them. But, yeah,
all right,
a little bit better than I did yesterday.
All right, there you go. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much, especially if you watched our live show on Sunday and you decided to catch up on the weekly shows. Thank you so much for joining. We do the show on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. This week's a little bit different, but we'll explain that in a minute. But this is our Tuesday show. We're going to give you a news segment, which talks about the injuries and news updates from the weekend. We'll do a waiver wire segment talking about the best waiver wire targets that you could have for this upcoming week. Then we're going to end the show with Stash or Trash. We'll tell you if there's players that you may want to toss to that waiver wire or if you want to keep them on your bench and stash them for a couple more weeks. Aside from that, we also do shows, like I said, on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. This week, it's only going to be a Thursday show. It's going to be a mega Thursday show to preview the Thanksgiving games and the rest of the Week 12 matchups. Our segment's going to be a tiny bit different. Still going to have our all boom and all bust teams for the weekend, and a fun Thanksgiving segment talking about those games. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Mega show on Thursday to get you prepared for Week 12. Then, of course, the live show on Sundays. You can find these weekly shows, or these daily shows, I should say, on all audio streaming platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Basically, anywhere where you find a podcast, you can find us, the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you're on Apple or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We'd appreciate that. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Hit that subscribe button, then drop a like on any video that you watch. All right, moving on to the news and the injury updates. First off, Kyle Pitts is believed to have torn MCL. I don't think that's 100% confirmed yet. He was placed on the IR, so he's going to be out from weeks 12 to, I guess, 15, leaving him only 2 weeks if he did return in your fantasy playoffs. And it does seem like the MCL is going to require surgery. So with that said, he's definitely droppable. Your thoughts on this Kyle Pitts injury?
Yeah, I think they said he's looking for a second opinion. They do think he's going to need the surgery, which I'm assuming would be season ending for him. Sucks for him as a player, for your fantasy team. I mean, you should have already had a backup tight end, knowing how inconsistent Kyle Pitts was to this point. So if you didn't, sorry, but that one's on you. And I mean, it sucks because he seems like a very young, good, talented player, but he was never being properly utilized in that team. So it sucks for fantasy, or it doesn't suck as much for fantasy as it does in real life for him. We hope he gets better. Of course, we never root for an injury, but for your fantasy teams, it might be better just to start playing the backup anyway. So, yeah.
Okay. My thoughts are that if you're a Kyle Pitts owner like me, you are now free from deciding to start Kyle Pitts. You could drop him and you can move on. It's almost like a little bit of a relief at this point. So, yeah, it sucks for him as a player. It's, very talented player, but never really had the opportunity to get going this season, and that kind of sucks. Justin Fields, who's been the best quarterback in fantasy football over the last 5 weeks, has a left shoulder injury. It was dislocated in the game. This is his non-throwing shoulder. Coach Matt Eberflus is calling him day to day and see where he is on Wednesday. He does play Nick's New York Jets on Sunday, which is a really bad matchup for Justin Fields. So I think he's definitely a sit this weekend and see what happens, but I do hope he's okay moving forward the rest of the season, because that does make those Bears pass catchers and skill position players a lot more attractive to play for your fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that.
Moving on to Jamar Chase. I believe he was on crutches last week, but there's Zach Taylor said he's going to start working out this week, I guess, maybe a limited practice or something like that. Zach Taylor also said that everything is going according to plan. So not sure if he's going to return this week or next week, but we'll see where he is as they practice throughout the week. Joe Mixon's in concussion protocol. He's versus Tennessee on Sunday. It's a good thing that he doesn't have a Thanksgiving game, because then he probably wouldn't play. He does have a chance to play on Sunday. We'll see where the week goes. Melvin Gordon was released by the Denver Broncos, basically 5 months too late, but I guess better now than ever when you have Chase Edmonds, who's dealing with a high ankle sprain and out a week, and they don't have another running back besides Latavius Murray. So good job, Broncos. You're just doing everything right at the moment. I don't get them. But anyway, I think he's got to be dropped by your fantasy teams. I'm sure he ends up somewhere as a backup, but I don't think he's going to be more than a backup anywhere else.
I don't know if he's going to clear waivers, which means he'll get picked up by one of the teams. So you don't have to make a decision until, I guess, Tuesday when you could pick him up, drop him, whatever. I do think he's still rosterable up until we do know where he lands. He's talented enough where he's going to land somewhere. He's talented enough where the Broncos thought that he deserved 50% of Javonte Williams' snap share at the beginning of the season. So someone like Baltimore or Philly, Buffalo, the Rams, one of those teams that's desperate for a running back, I could see making a move for Gordon, picking him up off the waivers just to guarantee that they have him. But I do think he's still rosterable up until we know what happens and where his destination is.
All right. Moving on, Matthew Stafford still has a possible concussion. He has not entered concussion protocol yet. I don't know what they're exactly waiting for, but I guess we'll have an update for you on Thursday's show, but he's not in concussion protocol yet. And lastly, some Jets news. Robert Saleh, he waited an hour to speak to the media today, and then he said that Zach Wilson is not the starting quarterback. Well, they're not committed to Zach Wilson being the starting quarterback Sunday, I guess. Nick, you're a Jets fan. Your thoughts on this, at least from a fantasy perspective?
From a fantasy perspective, when Zach Wilson was not the starter, the Jets passing game with Joe Flacco, whether it's Mike White, Joe Flacco, Chris Streveler, whoever they decide to throw out there, they were averaging about 45 pass attempts per game, a little over 300 passing yards, and Flacco had 5 touchdowns through 3 weeks. If you're getting those type of numbers and that type of volume, you're going to have to start receivers from this team. So for that reason alone, I do think Garrett Wilson is still rosterable until we do know what happens with Zach Wilson. If he does go out there against Chicago, he is going to win that game. And then you're going to be stuck into Zach Wilson playing for probably the rest of the season. So I do think that I do think Zach will come out as a starter, but if 1-2 drives, he's not getting anything done, I do think they're going to pull him from the game.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think Zach Wilson's good for fantasy football at all. So I don't think he's a good quarterback anyway. He's going to be on that long list of Jets quarterbacks over the next 12, 15 years. And this is why I'm against Seattle drafting a quarterback until they find the right one. So I'm happy we got Geno Smith and we don't have to worry about quarterback right now. Okay, moving on to the waiver wire. Going to talk about some guys you could add on your waiver wire. Not sure how many more relevant waiver wire weeks we'll have, but we still have one on week 12. So we're going to talk about it. And you have an opportunity to kind of bolster up your roster before the playoffs. So first off, only quarterback we have listed here is Deshaun Watson at 36%. He does play next week, as far as we know. So this is probably your last chance to get him. Next week, he's going to be one of the top targets for sure if you need a quarterback. So I think this might be the last week to get him and stash him on your bench. For running backs, Isaiah Pacheco had his first 100-yard game of his career this weekend. He's still only owned in 46% of leagues. Rashad White is only owned in 34% of leagues. He did probably fly under the radar during the bye week, but if you didn't get him last week, you're probably going to have a tougher time getting him this week, only owned at 34%. Latavius Murray, I think, is the sole survivor with the Broncos, and I think he's a starting running back over there at 34%. And Samaje Perine, who had 3 receiving touchdowns this week, is owned in 4% of leagues. Nick, I think 3 of these running backs have to be added this week. I think 3 of them have to be over 50%, and Perine probably in a couple other leagues as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think those are going to be the top 3 guys on the week, period, regardless.
If you're the number one waiver, I shouldn't ask that question. You got to keep your top 5 first. Anyway, on to wide receivers. Donovan Peoples-Jones had another week over double-digit fantasy points, only owned in 44% of leagues. Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't signed with the team yet, but it's probably coming in the next 2 weeks. So, if you have an open roster spot, only owned in 29% of leagues. Treylon Burks had a pretty productive first game as a rookie at only owned in 22% of leagues. Demarcus Robinson exploded this week, owned in 0.6% of leagues. Richie James is owned in under 1% of leagues. Who's your preferred receiver out of this group?
So when I'm thinking about this, I want to think who could be a league winner out of this group. And to me, there's only one, which is Odell Beckham. I do see the other 4 getting a lot of hype, and I do like Donovan Peoples-Jones as the number 2 from this group. But I don't know if Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to have the floor and the ceiling he's seen with Jacoby Brissett, who has played from behind in a lot of these games. Where I think Odell, if he gets put on that Dallas team, you just saw how well they cooked the Vikings defense, who's been very solid this year. They have one of the easiest remaining schedules. They're going to be able to get the ball down the field. There's a lot more touchdown opportunity for him than there is for any of the other receivers on this list. So the rumor around town is right after Thanksgiving, Odell's going to be meeting with the Giants and the Cowboys, and he's going to decide on one of those two. So we'll see what happens there, but I do think Odell needs to be owned this week more than ever.
Okay. And lastly, we have one tight end here. Greg Dulcich is at 49% of leagues. So, Nick, who is your top 5 waiver targets heading into week 12?
Number 1, I'm going with Isaiah Pacheco. It did appear that Clyde was actually going to get more of a role. He did play 5 snaps before he got hurt, which is more than he's seen in the last 2 games within the first quarter. But after that, Pacheco had his best game as a pro. He was very efficient on the ground. The Chiefs have the second easiest remaining schedule rest of the season. So, the Chiefs are going to find a way to run the ball just because they're going to coast to the rest up Mahomes and Kelsey a little bit more. They're going to walk away quite quickly in the first half with wins, and I think Pacheco's got a lot of upside there. Number 2, Rachaad White, one of the best pass-catching rookie running backs in the class. Had his first 100-yard game before the bye. I think you should have picked him up going into the bye week, but he's still owned in 2/3 of league, so very rosterable there. Next, I'd go Latavius Murray. Looks like he's the clear and the only running back in that backfield right now for the time being. So I do think as a 1-week play, he is a very good one. He'll still be matchup dependent. My number 4 would be Odell Beckham Jr., just because I think he's the only receiver that's available with league-winning upside. And then last, if you need a quarterback, it's Deshaun Watson. If you do not need a quarterback, I'd go Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Okay. My top 5 is going to be Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, Latavius Murray. I will go Treylon Burks, and then I'll go Deshaun Watson. Okay, moving on to stash or trash. These are players that are owned in over 50% of leagues that you may or may not want to be owning in over 50% of leagues. So first off, Deontay Johnson's owned in 90% of leagues.
I mean, there's no one I would cut him for that we named, but
you wouldn't cut him for Rachaad White?
No, I still wouldn't, just because I know that Deontay has so much volume where I'd rather take the guaranteed volume over someone that I think is going to break 50% snap share this week. But I would, if you have the receiving depth and you need a running back, I mean, I wouldn't persecute you for doing it.
I would do it if I needed if Rachaad White's going to play more than Deontay Johnson on my team, I would. Allen Robinson at 76%. He had 14 fantasy points this week with the touchdown.
I'm still holding him. He played pretty well for his first week without Cooper Kupp there. The one worry I do have is they did not just give him the workload that Cooper Kupp had. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did see more workload as the weeks came through.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't trust starting him on most teams, and I could find a better receiver, so I'd be okay cutting him. Chase Claypool at 56%.
I would roster everyone we said over Chase Claypool.
Yep. Drake London at 75%. He had a touchdown.
I would roster everyone we said over Drake London.
I would too. How about Brian Robinson at 73%?
I would roster the 5 guys from my top 5 at least over Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I would as well. AJ Dillon at 67%.
I would roster the top 5 that I said over AJ.
He's owned in 67%. That's still a lot of leagues. He hasn't cracked double-digit fantasy points in forever. Garrett Wilson, 81%.
I will hold him unless if it's Pacheco or White. I think anyone else, I would rather have Garrett Wilson over.
I would cut him for my top 5 if it's not a keeper league. I just don't trust anybody at quarterback for the Jets right now, especially Zach Wilson. Curtis Samuel at 72%.
Same thing. I think I'd rather have those top 3 running backs, and I'd rather chase Odell's upside than not trust Curtis Samuel on a week.
Okay. And Michael Carter at 83%. That run game has not been effective since they lost Breece Hall. I think I would cut him for any of those running backs.
True. That's not true. They were good against Buffalo the week before the bye.
How many points did Michael Carter have?
Let me pull it up.
Has he had like a good game since Breece Hall went out?
Check.
I don't think so. I don't think him or James Robinson has. I feel like that offense has fallen flat.
The 2 games after the 2 games before the bye against New England, he had 10, and then against Buffalo he had 16. Then this week at New England he had his worst game of the year at 2.7.
Okay.
So I'm still willing to hold them because they are still a run first team. And as you said before the show, like you thought that the Jets wouldn't be able to do anything against New England. Like it was the game that we all expected.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. In that case, yes, I still think I'd rather have Rachaad White than him. An offense is going to score a lot of points. I don't think the Jets score a lot of points. I think I'd still rather have Rachaad White over Michael Carter. I would debate Pacheco or Latavius. Well, Latavius in the same situation. I think I'd take him over Latavius Murray. Pacheco, I would debate. So,
but I think that's fair. Pacheco, Rachaad White, and him. That'd be a good one for who you'd want to like. There's the cut 1, marry 2, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a good debate for those 3.
All right, that is our Tuesday show, our waiver wire show for week 12. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully we helped you with your potential waiver wire players, and yeah, hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit. If you enjoyed this show and you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, please give us that 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching and listening on YouTube, drop a like on this video, hit the subscribe button, share the links with your friends, share the love of the Primetime Fantasy Podcast, share it with your league mates. We'd appreciate that as well. Next time we hear from us will be Thursday. It's our last show of the week before the live show, so it's our big show to prepare you for the Thanksgiving games and for your Week 12 matchup. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to put a lot of work into it. It's going to be a super mega episode, and hopefully you guys enjoy that one as well. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving and spend time with, the people that you want to spend time with. So aside from that, thank you so much for listening. Best of luck on your waiver wires, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.